in listen-only mode.
Okay, well, welcome everybody. Sorry for the brief delay here. I had some technical difficulties getting my player to go, but my name is Ladd Nelson with Carlson Software, and here with me today is Jennifer DiBona of That CAD Girl, who will be going through some annotation and labeling tips and tricks for us today. Barring any unforeseen difficulties, today's presentation is being recorded and will be posted to the Carlson website after the broadcast. For those of you who have questions that you would like to have addressed during today's presentation, feel free to either text them into the question area or into the chat window that's over on your GoToMeeting control panel, and I and Jennifer will do our best to get those questions answered. So with that, I'll turn it over to Jennifer. You have the floor.
Thank you, Ladd. Welcome everybody to today's webinar. As Ladd said, we're going to cover some annotation and labeling tips and tricks, and we will be both in survey and civil. Not sure what kind of an audience we have out there today. So we'll start off just with the introductions and mention that we do have another Carlson webinar tomorrow. For those of you that attended the overview of IntelliCAD 7 presentation about a month and a half ago, we had those technical difficulties that day that we did not get it recorded. So we've had some fairly significant updates to the IntelliCAD, at least the testing version of that I'll be going back over tomorrow. So for those of you that have not signed up for that, you may want to look into it. And I'll just jump out real quickly out to a web browser and show you Carlson Software's web page. And if you're haven't been here before, haven't dug deep into it, if you notice where my mouse is now, the webinar's calendar you can see here. So this is where you would be able to sign up for tomorrow's webinar plus any others that get scheduled down the road. And then again, for the recorded movies, that button right there takes you to the whole movie library. So this is an archive for webinars that have been done over the last probably 5 years at the least, and today's webinar will go in here as well. So if you haven't checked out the movies, I would encourage you to do that. Also, just briefly, I'll mention that I do have a couple of bootcamp training courses coming up here in the month of April in Woodbridge, New Jersey and Chicago. And the sign-up deadlines on those are approaching, so if you're interested, have questions, please contact me. So with that, let's jump right into the training for today. So again, I'm going to cover a little bit of everything. I will start off just for those of you that may be new to Carlson and explain just a little bit of an overview of the way Carlson handles annotation. So there are a few pieces to this. The primary one I would say is if you start a new drawing, the new drawing wizard will come up and ask you for a horizontal scale. And also, if you are already in a drawing, you can go to under settings, the drawing setup, and you can change the horizontal scale here. Now, one thing that you'll notice is that when you have a horizontal scale, you also have, and I'm just going to mention text for the time being, a text plot size. So this is a really, I think it's a great thing, a great way that Carlson has organized the text and annotation and labeling in their software packages, in that everything is based on the plotted height or the plotted size of text, dimensions, symbols, and so on. One thing that may confuse you just a little bit is there's some inconsistencies there where it may be called text plot size here, it's called text height in other things. But what's so nice about that is what it allows you to do is set up your standards for text sizes throughout the Carlson software program. So whether it's in survey or civil, all of your standards should be set by using this text plot size, text height, and so on. Once you do that, you have separate, and I'll mention this several times through the presentation, you have separate settings files that can be saved and exported out. But also here under Carlson Configure, you can notice that there's a Save As button. And once you have all of those standard text heights and even layers and really all of that standardized to your company or your department's specifications, you can go here under Carlson Configure, pick Save As, and this allows you to export one monstrous configuration file. It has a CFG extension, and this kind of wraps up and rolls up all of those settings across the entire Carlson platform. What you can do with that, one person in your organization or a consultant can be in charge of setting all that up for you. And then once that configuration file has been exported, you can use the load button here in Carlson Configure and load all that back in. Once all that's set up, once all of your labeling and annotation standards have been set based on the plotted size and the plotted height, then it gets to a point where the only variable is that scale, and that will change per drawing, per project, as you know. So let's see how that works in practice. So I'm going to start off here. Let's move over to Survey. I froze my layers for the contours, and it looks like I have an extra polyline in here that I don't need. But let's just start off by adding an area label. And when I add that area label, oh, now I know why. You can see that it's added this, this label. The command line is asking me if I want to keep the closed polyline. I'll say no, and that makes that disappear. But let's just look at the label that's been placed. There may be some things we want to change in this. One, it looks like the scale's too big, but also two, I would say it's probably more likely to be standard that when you put the lot number and then these area labels, that the lot number we would want it a little larger. So let's see how this all plays out under area layout and then area defaults. So you can see the used fields that I have. If I double click on lot description, and again I talked about a little bit of inconsistency here. In the first box, I think, actually it may have been the same thing, but text size scaler is set, it's saying the same thing here. That is the plotted height of text. Okay, so for my lot description, I want the plotted height to be 0.15. What that's going to do is be multiplied against my scale, and that's what determines the height of the text in the drawing. So if I pick OK, just make that one simple change here, and go back to area by interior point, and I'll just pick the second one here and place it. You can see that it's increased in size. And again, just to demonstrate how scale will work and how it can change things, I've got my, let's say I've got my standard set, got my lot description text height, I've got my area labels text height, and I may be in a different drawing, and all I need to do now is change the horizontal scale. And because everything in my standard text and labeling setup is based on the plotted height, that's the only change I need to make, whether it's in the same drawing or a different drawing, to now have it applied at a different scale. So it does make it very nice. Makes it easy to be consistent. It allows the setup to be done again once and then applied exactly the same no matter which what drawing scale you're using. So that's just one example. Let's go over, and now that we know how Carlson looks at text, the text size and scale and how all that applies, let's look at the different labeling features that Carlson gives us. So we're still, again, in Carlson Survey. Under the Annotate pull-down, and I'll just mention Annotate is in Civil and Survey, so you can get it in either package. Survey Text has some fairly good labeling routines that I find people don't use nearly enough. Offset dimensions. So I'm going to place these 3 different types of survey text, and then we'll look at the defaults and see what kind of options we've got. Offset dimensions. Notice that my command line is prompting me for my building or object corner. One thing that's nice is that it automatically, I did not do this, it automatically put me in an endpoint O-snap. And then for my second pick, if you can see that it's automatically snapping perpendicular. So when I go in and look, it's put a 56.1 foot dimension, it's put an arrowhead here, and I can just go right back to that command, again, snap perpendicular, and get that building offset label. So pretty neat little feature. Okay, again, it does have some different options we'll look at in a second. Another thing that I like under survey text is building dimensions. Okay, so this just allows me to pick a polyline, select it, and when I hit enter, I have applied some formatting here, so we'll look again at the options. You know, the only thing that's ended up happening is that I just need to move that one piece of text. You know, a few things you can do there. And then the last one I think is a really neat thing. It's a Joyner Text. And I would just challenge you, when I do this command, I can think of several different places that this could be used in addition to a Joyner Text. But what it allows you to do is to pick a polyline or a line, and then pick the starting point for your text. And what it does is automatically put you at the right angle. So again, I can see that command being used to label maybe a center line of a road, you know, do any number of things as I'm trying to get that text properly aligned with whatever line work. Now let's just quickly go in and look at those survey text defaults. So in addition to the layer and the text style, and again that text size scaler, it does look like same thing here. Everything's set to a 0.08 as the plotted size of text. Arrow size in many cases, or maybe all cases, is also established as part of it's a plotted size of that arrow, and I just typically put it at the same size as my text. So you can see here the offset dimension text. These are all of the settings available. I had mine set to a single arrow. You can put dual arrows. You can put a dimension only, and so on. On the Joyner Text, you've got some justification options, and then the building dimensions, you can see that I had an offset from line. Again, power of Carlson is allowing you to set this stuff up where it's based on the plotted height or size, or in this case distance. So that 0.04 will be multiplied times the scale. So the larger the drawing, the larger the text, the further it's going to offset off of the line work. So again, it's real nice. Auto label, it went to the interior for everything. You could set it to exterior and so on. So again, I think it's a pretty powerful little set of routines that I would just encourage anybody to go out and put a little thought into how you can use it, and I think it'll save you a lot of time, make you more efficient. So with that, let's move on to center lines. Again, center lines, stationing of center lines can be done in either survey or civil. And I'm just going to stay in survey. And I have created a centerline file for this. You get some more flexibility as far as labeling goes. and I'll show you what I mean. Under Centerline, I will station polyline centerline. And I'll just do a quick check, make sure everything is set up here. My label's set up. I've got my layer. You can see my text size scaler again, text offset scaler, again, based on the plotted distance. As the scale changes, that will increase. So I'll accept everything here for now. And my center line will be labeled or stationed using the Centerline file that's saved externally. And let me pick OK. There's the Centerline. I'll pick Open. And you can see that it was automatically labeled. And now, this one did come in right, but I'm sure pretty much everyone that's ever labeled a station to Centerline has had it come in wrong. So maybe the polyline was drawn in the wrong direction. This one happened to be right. But when I mentioned that with the Centerline, stationing it by the Centerline file, it gives us some more options. For instance, if I go to my Input Edit Centerline file and load in that Centerline file that I'm working with, my starting station was 0, but maybe I meant to have it 1,000. So I can do that and exit, save changes, yes, and it doesn't look like it worked. Let me try that one more time. Okay, I'm not sure what happened there. It should have updated. Let me double check my settings. Everything's linked, so I'm not exactly sure what happened there. Lad, do you have any input? Have I just found a bug?
Oh, I'm sorry, I was offline. I'm sorry, what were you running into?
It didn't update my station labels.
And that is actually a polyline with the centerline information on it, or is it just a polyline that you just labeled in?
I labeled it by the Centerline file.
Okay, I'd have to check on that one. I'll see if I can replicate it.
Never mind. I know you were answering questions. Okay, it updated there. I'm not quite sure what happened. Another thing that you can do, and I interrupted myself there for a minute. Let me load that back in. But it's a little bit buried, but under Tools, you can reverse that Centerline. So again, you see that happening. I'm actually making it wrong here, but it's not updating. All right. This is one of those where I went through it in my prep and everything worked fine. So should have updated. I'll look into that. Let's look at also my labeling by station and offset. So this will be, again, under the Centerline file, so you can get there from survey or civil. Label, station, and offset. Once again, I'm going to go up here and make sure that I'm associated to the right Centerline file. It's reading the correct way, so we'll see. And let's start off by putting the alignment name here. And I'll put everything on row 1. It's going to go above the leader. I will also add the station. And we'll just leave all these as defaults right now and then come back in, make a change. And what you can see is on the left-hand side, it does allow me to label at the same time to station for label station and offset for up to 2 Centerline files at one time. So the first alignment and then the second alignment. So that's nice if you're at an intersection. You also get the box that shows you where you are in relation to that Centerline. So if I just snap to an endpoint, and let's zoom in and take a look at that. Okay, I didn't get my alignment name. We'll go back in and see why. So I'll hit my Enter key to repeat, And my alignment, okay, oh, I know why. I need to give it just a practical name, so I'll just call it Road 1. And we'll pick OK, just get a little bit of a change, see what kind of additional information we get. So there we go. So you can see that I've got Road 1, I've got my station all on the same line. So again, some things that you can do to change that is I've got both of these on the top line. Maybe I want to change my station to be below the line. So I'm just going to make incremental changes, and I'll just relabel something else so that we can see. And again, it's really easy to manipulate. There are a lot of information that you can add from this. I do not have a vertical reference, but if you have a profile file or just go from a 3D polyline, obviously you can connect into a road network, or if you just want to enter type in an elevation, you can do that as well. Again, here are your text size scaler, text and leader. Everything is set to a 0.06 in this case. It gets a little bit smaller, and again, it's going to be dependent on whatever the scale of the drawing is. Okay, so I'm going to look next at profile labeling. So I did have contours in here. I do have a surface file, and I'm going to, I can actually draw profile from here in Survey. Civil also, obviously, you can draw profile. So I'll stay in Survey as long as I can. And when I draw profile, I'll pick the Add button. And, oh, actually there's an Add Multiple. So I'll select 2 files, open this up. You can see I have an existing ground, and then I have a proposed ground with vertical curves. And I have a horizontal scale set at 30, vertical scale at 3. If we look at your grid settings, again, technically may not be completely about labeling, but you will again notice that we have some offset scalars and things like that that are based again on the plotted height or size or distance. And let's look at what we get here, and then we'll go in and make a couple changes. So I place my grid, and now at the command line it's asking me to pick the vertical position for all vertical curve text. So I'm just going to left pick here with my mouse, and you can see all of the text that I ended up with. And it may be more than I need, it may be less than I need, it may not be oriented the right way. And let's just go in and look. So one thing, you can see that my elevation text has been offset quite a bit. So that may be something I'd like to change. So I'll hit enter, go back in, and let's just look at that change. So I'd mentioned this previously, that offset scalar is, again, based on the scale. So when it's set at 1, I'm at a 30 scale. So that text is offset 1 inch or 30 feet from the bottom of the grid. So if I change that to maybe a 0.2, again, think of what I'm doing. I'm just setting it up so that this is a standard setup, standard settings for drawing profiles in my company. And you can see how that's, brought that in closer. The other thing that I'll mention, particularly when it comes to profiles, is that I had made a point of showing you in Carlson Configure how you can export and wrap up all of your command settings in that one CFG file. Well, in addition to that, pretty much, and I should have mentioned this earlier, pretty much every one of the labeling or annotation commands or features in Carlson have their own unique settings file that can be applied. So for instance, this command is draw a profile. If I hit the Save Settings button, it's not asking me to save a CFG file. It's allowing me to save these settings just for profiles. Now, why is that important? Well, when you wrap up that CFG file, it takes all the settings as they currently are in that drawing. Well, for things like profiles, there are 3 or more different types of profiles that you may be drawing in your drawing. So I can think of a road profile that would have certain labeling associated with roads. I can think of a sanitary sewer profile that will have labeling that's unique to sanitary sewer. And I can see, storm drain that would have its own set of labeling. So when you write the CFG file, it's whatever's saved in the drawing currently. But separately, you may also, I would expect, need to have a separate road profile file, settings file, a sanitary sewer profile settings file, and a storm drain. And that's what these kinds of files are for. So when you get your road profile, labeling, and all of that set exactly like you like, save settings, save it out. When you get your sanitary storm labels set, save it out. And then those can just be loaded individually as you need to draw that profile. So road labels can be managed here. And for those of you that may be using a little bit of an older version of Carlson, this is relatively new, just in the last couple of years, this dynamic editor. So you can see that we have it labeled to show us either the crest or the sag point. If you double-click on the labels over here, it will bring it up and give you all of the labeling, the notation. Do you want the sag or crest point on the profile or in the vertical curve text? So you can see it's here. Okay, so let's look at slope, for instance. You can see our slope is shown here and here. But with slope, you can see the position. We have options for on the profile, in the vertical curve text, which would be up here, or in both. So if we change it to both and then update the preview, you can see that those slopes have been added here. So it will be a personal preference, and I'll just leave that. Just a few other things. The PVC point, you can see how the labels can be changed and adjusted, notation however you like. Position to the vertical curve line, everything is set actually below. It's set over here, and it's set to draw vertically. I can change that and update, and you can see the change that made. So it's now been added right here. So a lot of different things that you can do here. Draw PVI, the V, it's shown right now at full tangents. You can see here, I may want partial tangents. Update. And the last thing I do want to mention, because to me I think it makes a little more sense, that label placement, where it prompted me how to pick a point to show where I wanted those labels vertically. And it placed all of them at the same place. I have a few options to do here. Pick individual positions, so for each vertical curve I'll be prompted. Auto place it above the highest PVI is usually what I would select. And once I redraw this, you'll see how that shows up and how it applies itself. Click OK. I'm going to redraw the profile. And notice at that time it did not ask me to place that. It just found the highest PVI, set it at a point above that, and then made all the others the same height. So a lot of flexibility, a lot more, again, for those of you in the newer version, from the older version of Carlson. This is probably pretty good stuff to you. So I'm going to switch over here and let's look at some labeling options. And these, I believe, everything I've got from here on is going to be in civil only. So I will switch over to civil. And I'll start off by just looking at, I've got 4 building pads, and I'm going to turn on my drawing inspector, and you can see they've already been elevated. And what I'd like to do is add labels to those. So under the 3D data menu, I can go to label polylines and then label pad elevation. So I've got a prefix if I choose to do that, so I may add something like FFE for finished floor elevation. It's going to be oriented horizontally to the building pad. It's going to put it in the center of the pad. And my text size scaler is at a 0.1. I've got my labels. I've got erase old labels turned on. And I'm just going to pick OK, select all 4 of these, and you can see the text that's come in. And I'm sure that what that's done is it's just found the centroid of that object, and that's how it's found the center. It looks a little off-center, but I think it's because it's using the centroid of the object. Now, if I hit Enter, there's another thing that I can add. I do have erase old labels turned on. That's going to ensure I don't have duplicates. But at the same time, I can also put in an offset. So this may be my subgrade. So what I want is a finished floor elevation label and then also a subgrade label. And select that, and you can see, again, it's a nice handy tool for us. Additionally, what you can do from here is those labels have some intelligence. If I go to 3D data and change elevations of those building pads, so if you're in the design process, you know this is the kind of thing that can happen. Now, probably what will not happen is I'm going to do a differential change, and I'm going to add 1,000 feet. Again, this is the part you wouldn't quite do. You may want to make a change of half a foot or 3/4 of a foot or a foot. I'm going to do it at 1,000 just so it's an obvious change for demo purposes. Ignore zeros. Yes, that means that if I put a window around any polylines that have a 0 elevation, so if I have a 2D 0 elevation version under this, it will be ignored. So that's important to say yes to. Change layer, I'm going to say no. And we'll just select all 4 of these. Now, you can see that the elevation's changed. The text doesn't automatically update, but under label polylines, you can tell it to update pad elevation labels. So as soon as I do that, any labels that were placed in the drawing from the label pad elevation command will be automatically updated to make sure that they're consistent and that they match the polylines that they originally labeled. Okay. So the next thing that I want to show is just a couple of different ways to label spot elevations. So again, with Drawing Inspector, you can see that I do have elevations along this polyline. So a few things. I can go to 3D data. I can go to spot elevations and draw spot elevations. So this is a powerful little command. So I'm not going to go through everything, but I'll just hit a couple high points. Right now it's set to label with leader. I can change my symbol if I want. I can put an arrow if I want. Right now it's set to 0, so I don't think I'll get a leader. I can set individual or an interval along a polyline. I can set my layer name, my text size. You can see it's set to a 0.06. If I want, I can use a surface as a reference or 2 surface difference. So if I'm trying to say, you know, cut or fill, I can do that. And I'm just going to place a simple one here. There's another way that I want to go through and make sure we cover as well. So I selected, it's read the elevation. You can see at my command line. And then because I told it I wanted to place it with a label, You can see it labels it like that. So that's one way to add elevation labels. Another way is also down here under label polylines under 3D data. And I can label elevations along a polyline. So depending on what you want to do, spot elevations, if you're not actually going along a polyline, you've got some additional ways to do that through that command, through draw spot elevations. But if it is primarily along a polyline, this may be the better option. Label elevations along a polyline, select it, and then I pick the polyline. And like pretty much everything in Carlson's stable here, there's a lot of options. So, kind of pick and choose. Make one change at a time, see what effect it has. Our text size scaler, you can see we're at a 0.1. I think I'm going to change that to 0.08, make it a little smaller. The source for elevations, I'm going to pick. So that just means I'm going to snap to that polyline. Side for labels, I'm going to go to the left. Left justify, I believe is how that works. Label alignment, I do want it horizontal. And I will have it draw a leader, and that'll become important, and you'll see why. I'll have it draw the text above the leader. And again, I'm going to have it ignore 0 elevations. The nice thing here is if I snap to an endpoint and I have a 2D polyline and it happens to be on top of my 3D, it's only going to grab that 3D version there. So I think with this, I'm just going to pick OK. Just as an example, I'm going to snap here. Not sure why it went that direction. I thought I told it to go left, but anyway. So you can see I've added a couple. Let me hit my Enter key, go back in. And side for labels. I have to think about that one. I'm not sure if that's a bug or if that's the way it's meant to work, and my brain's not working right now. But what I can also do from here is label it as a prefix. So this is some of that functionality that I did not have in the draw spot elevations. So I can add a BC for a back of curb, and what that allows is just when I snap to that, you can see the prefix. There, it went to the left. Still not sure how that's working. Go back in one more time. And the additional offset is really nice if on your plans you want to see both the back of curb and the gutter elevation, for instance. So I could put a -0.5 for an elevation change, maybe a G for the gutter as the prefix. And now when I label, you can see what I have. Now, once those are placed, Carlson gives me some other tools here, and one is to move the elevation labels. So this is one reason when I use this, I'm going to always turn on that draw leaders, because now what I can do is just kind of swing this thing around and move it and place it wherever I need to place it. Okay, so that makes it nice for getting around anything else that may be in your drawing in your way. And then I think my last thing that I want to go through is, jumping around a bit, is under spot elevations. This is actually a nice command as well. Adjust elevation labels. This is going to work for any number of things. Again, it's mostly layer based, but if you have labels, and this will work too for those of you that use the 2D to 3D polyline elevating commands. So you can see you have options up here. By elevating 2D polylines to 3D using text with a leader or just text, well, if you're in that design mode, and again, you're trying to, you may decide you need to raise, excuse me, raise everything by ½ a foot or ¼ of a foot. You can use adjust elevation labels, and use the offset elevation, base elevation or offset. Again, yeah, I'm going to leave that at 100 just so it's easy to see here in the demo. And when I pick OK, it does prompt me. You have to watch your command line. It prompts me to select a sample of the elevation text, so I'll pick that one. And then just select everything, and it's going to find anything on that layer. And it also prompts me if I have multiple prefixes. I'll scoot that over, pushing the right arrow. Anything on this side, it's going to change its elevation. Pick OK. And you can see it's added 100 just to the ones that had a BC or a G elevation prefix. Did not do these because they didn't have the BC and the G. It did not do this one because it was on a separate layer. So again, watch the prompts. It's a powerful command to me. Hopefully this and a lot of the other things that I've shown you will be able to save you some time. So that is pretty much my presentation. Lad, do you have any questions?
The only one that really came in that I think you could probably help address would be actually some of routines related to the labeling of lines and angles and distances on property lines, showing bearings and distances, and possibly even combining multiple angles and distances. So just underneath sort of the general annotate tools.
Okay. So just generally we'll...
Yeah, just to sort of say we want to show some bearings and distances on those lot lines.
Some parallel. So if I go to annotate, again, this is going to be commands that are available both in survey and civil. Under annotate defaults, you can set up, again, you've got a horizontal scale setting here, which is read from your main drawing setup. Text size scaler, text offset scaler, again, based on the plotted height, plotted distance. Under angle, you can set up your default layer, your default text size. This is for your bearings. And then under the distance, this is for the distance part of your bearing and distance labels. Series lines are, I'll try to do one of these. A series line is a case like this, where I may want to show a total distance, total bearing and distance on the outside, and then only the component distances here inside. And then parallel lines are, I don't have anything here. If I have more than two lines that are parallel, so these little lot lines, I'll draw a couple more in. What parallel lines allows you to do is label bearing and distance on this one, and let's say I have another one here, bearing and distance, but the 2 or 3 in between that are parallel would only have a distance label. So let's see how that works in practice. And what I'll do is just copy that to here and another one to here. So under annotate, if I do an auto annotate, let me set this up to have both of them below because I really want to focus on that area. Combine common angles, I'll have it do series and parallel and show it on opposite. I get kind of confused on my options here. And let me pick OK. And I'm going to select, don't want to select too much. Actually, let me freeze some things. Freeze that and that. Okay, and I can get rid of that. Okay, so it looks like I got my parallel. So you can see that it labeled bearing and distance here, and it labeled only the distance, it labeled bearing and distance here. So those were the 4 lines that were parallel. And I am not sure why I didn't get my component distances. Any idea, Webb?
I'm sorry, it's hard to see what you've got there.
So I had my series labels turned on. I wanted it to label that on the outside, which it did, but I wanted my component distances in here.
The only thing I can think of is it might be because you've got maybe the lines on different layers potentially. Between your lot lines, your side lines, and your front and back lines. That's the only I can think of. I'd have to check on it.
Yeah, let me just go in. Let me just change it to series and see if I get what I'm actually expecting with just that. Yeah, I know I've gotten that to work previously, and I'm just not sure why there. But that, in theory, that is how the series and parallel are supposed to work. Was there something in particular that somebody wanted to see, or did I hit mostly what we needed?
Yeah, I think it was just more of getting the settings established for lines that were placed through processing a deed description or that were potentially traversed into a drawing. So I think, yeah, that probably sufficed.
Okay.
And possibly another one is the ability to label bearings while lines are being drawn.
I don't think you can do that.
Yeah, I don't know if we actually have that routine in there. I'd have to check on that one.
Not line by line, I don't think.
Okay. So we'll get that request put into programming, and so as you're drawing a line, we can see if we can, I mean, it'd be very easy to throw the label in there as well.
Yeah, and I'm not sure what the purpose of that is, if it's just to double check, and if it is just to double check, one thing that it's not really right as you do it, but one thing you can do is turn on the bearing and distance labels in Drawing Inspector. So I don't know if that helps. If you keep Drawing Inspector turned on, you can see that it's showing the bearing and distance of anything that I hover over. What's really neat about it is that it does it even if it's part of a polyline. So you can see this is a polyline, but it's still kind of stripping out and reading the bearing of the line segment that I'm specifically hovering over. And just to take that one step further, if you tell it to also display curve data, well, there's no curve there. There's a curve there. So again, even if it's part of a polyline, you can see that. And I know that's not what whoever was asking the question, but by turning on that Drawing Inspector, you get some real-time feedback after a line is drawn, even if it's part of a polyline.
Okay, yeah, we'll check on that one. After the participant who presented that question, we'll try to follow up with you afterwards to find out if we can more specifically address your questions. The other question that came in was if you've drawn, for example, a line and label it with a line number and place that line number in a table, will changes to the line be reflected in the table?
Yes, it will. So do I need to demonstrate it, or?
If you've got some, yeah, if you want to throw that in there, that'd be fine.
So annotate, again, let me just use my auto annotate. And for what we're doing here, I'll just tell it for the time being to always use line tables. and I'll select it and prompts me for that. And then what was it, just if the line changes?
Yeah, that, or if you've if you rotate it, you probably just want to double check in your settings underneath Carlson configure if you've got your link line.
Yeah, that should be all I need, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And if I just make that change, I thought that it would.
Yeah, it did.
Changed. Oh, it did. It's
Yep.
just that automatic. Let's see. So 36007 for line 1.
Yeah, so if you just grip at it and move something else, you'll see the labels change.
Yeah, so you can see it. Yeah, it's almost too quick. I didn't even see it happen.
Let's see here, and I've got some other questions. Let's check. Said, is the reason that the distances that did not come in on the rear property line due to the fact that the line is not broken at the lot corners? I don't believe.
Yes, it is. Absolutely. I knew there was. Yeah, that catches me every time. Yeah. So if I go in, I forget that. And if I add a polyline vertex to that endpoint and that endpoint and that endpoint, that's exactly it. And if I go back and auto annotate, let's see, turn that back to never, turn that to series and parallel, and just grab, there we go.
Okay, good catch.
Yeah, very good. Thank you for that.
Okay, let's see here, and yeah, I think that's about it for questions for right now. So, was there anything else further than Jennifer that you wanted to discuss?
No, just not sure how many we have signed up for our webinar tomorrow. Again, it's going to be on the overview of IntelliCAD 7. There's been a lot of questions. So for that, I'll just touch a little bit on the IntelliCAD 6, that for most people that have been using IntelliCAD, it's probably been IntelliCAD 6.6. Show you where we are currently with IntelliCAD 7, answer any questions. And then again, just a reminder, I've got a couple classes and training sessions set up next month. So anyway, I'm always free. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to contact me directly. And then between Lad and I, we'll follow up on any other questions that come in through the chat.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you, Jennifer, for your time and presentation today. And again, for the attendees that are still here, we will have this hopefully posted later on today or possibly tomorrow. So thank you for your time, and that concludes today's presentation.